G'day viewers and welcome to another Phil and Jen in the Philippines. As you know, I'm in Australia, but I've been requested by a lot of subscribers to give them some idea of what it's going to cost after they set up home on a day-to-day basis. Now, I know this has been done by a myriad of different vloggers, and I'm not going to do things as indistinct as rents and this type of thing, because it will vary from wherever you are in the Philippines. Not by much, but on the same token too, you have access to internet. You can look up these types of rentals and purchasing. What I'm going to do is concentrate on the day-to-day living and the spending of money on a day-to-day basis that you're going to run into from day one. So as normal, subscribe, ring the notifications bell, comment, like the old thumbs up thing, and share with your friends if this is going to be of any use or you believe it's going to be any use. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a list of basic items, and I'm going to do this. It's all going to be quoted in peso and converted then to the Australian dollar. Now keep this in mind. It's a lot easier for me to do that rather than worry about other currencies. I suppose I should do it in US dollars, but you can do the conversion. Australian dollar is around about 35 to 37 pesos to the dollar. We'll keep it on 35. And the American is around 50, 52, depending on when you do the conversion rate. So you'll have to convert the Australian dollar or the peso amount over. Now, the first thing I want to say, for those of you out there that aren't seasoned travelers or go away probably once or twice a year, but and then convert currencies. It's a difficult thing to get a mindset after a period of time, in a short period of time, to be able to convert and continue to convert back to your own currency, so you know it's either cheap or expensive. And a lot of the times you've got to throw that out the door because it just is what it is. But to keep an eye on your spending patterns, you must get used to a number of things. The Philippines is a difficult place because the currency values are so large. Most of the notes you're going to get are 1,000 peso notes, and then there's a 500 note, and then there's a 20 peso note. So when you're dealing with figures in the thousands, say for instance, to purchase a large item might be 5, 6, 7, 10,000 pesos, and you're seeing prices in the thousands or the hundreds, it becomes a little bit difficult to equate that to your own currency until you become used to what is a reasonable value. And of course, then you throw that out the door because you can't really compare, because that's what's available. But this is specifically designed to let you know if, say, for instance, we're going to start with food. If you were to supplement, and a lot of you guys out there are going to say, oh, well, I'll just go native and I'll just eat Filipino. But there's going to come a time when you're going to require supplementary foods. You're going to go through the supermarkets, the SM, the KCCs. You're going to see things, and you're going to want a taste of home. So in my particular case, after being there for so long and not really being able to consume the amount of pork that they consume, or the liking for rice as they like it in the Philippines, I had to supplement just to keep relatively healthy. And of course, it was comfort food from home. Now, before anyone comes back and in the subscription comments, look, this is not a generic list. And of course, some items on the list are going to be either more expensive or cheaper, depending on where you're living in the Philippines. So guys, this is only reflective of Mindanao and Dumaguete, the two places I last spent time in. Of course, prices will vary for seasonal goods all over the Philippines. You're going to get some cheaper, you're going to get some more expensive. But it's surprising, once you break out of the peso amount and convert it back to your own currency, and then it's impossible not to compare it with home. And one would expect a lot of the times you're going to pay for premium product at home, what the conversion rate is, and this is a way to keep check on your money. As a typical shopping venture, as far as I'm concerned, one thing I couldn't get used to, or I was in a position where I didn't have to get used to it, is powdered milk or whitener in my coffee. I drink normal coffee with milk. But dairy products are difficult to get hold of in the Philippines as we know them, like jugs of gallons of milk and litres of milk and whatever. Ice cream, not so much, but things like our dairy products, cream and whatever, hideously expensive compared to what we're used to at home. It's easy to cut out cream, but I couldn't cut out milk, and I enjoy milk in my coffee. So 1 litre of milk on average costs, and it's UHT milk. It's not fresh milk. It's the preserved milk you'll often find on the shelf and not in the fridge. Is about 82 pesos, which converts over to the Australian dollar of $2.40 per litre. Now, that's relatively expensive per litre, because in Australia we buy about 2 litre, so it's about double the price. Bread. Now, there's plenty of bakeries available around the Philippines, but they do have a tendency to produce a sweetened type bread, almost a cake texture. Where I come from, we're savoury bread eaters. If you're from Europe, you're a savoury bread eater most of the time. And in the US, it's a little bit sweeter there. But on the same token, it's not the same as the US baked bread. And bread's a staple for Westerners most of the time. So if you can find a decent loaf, possibly baked by expat bakers or by Vietnamese bakers or whatever, you can expect to pay around 150 pesos per loaf. And we're not talking a jumbo loaf, we're talking a normal loaf, and that converts to the Australian dollar at around $4.30. And we're talking white. If you go into the more exotic whole grains and this type of thing, you can expect to pay more. But I'm just quoting $4.30 Australian or 150 pesos for bread. So you can see the difference in costing. Now, pasta, because they are pasta eaters over here. When I say that, you won't go to any do in the Philippines, or very few do's, where they don't throw the old Filipino spaghetti at you. And that recipe is, it's different from the savoury style of spaghetti bolognese and whatever I know, and possibly most of you know. They do like a sweetened sauce, so they throw in condensed milk into the pasta. I know a lot of you are cringing, but that's the way they do it, and they call it Filipino style spaghetti sauce. Okay, but the pasta you can get hold of in varying shapes, from the long pasta, the curls and whatever, can go from around 80 pesos up to, but the average cost is around 150 pesos for the normal 500 gram, which again is $4.30. Now, I know in Australia I can buy pasta for a good quality pasta for 80 cents, so you can obviously see the differences there. Bacon, a lot of you Americans will enjoy bacon, and they do have Canadian style maple flavored bacon. They do have bacon over here, but again, it's expensive, or I presume more expensive than you're picking it up. It's in relatively smaller packets. If you're going in to buy a kilo, and I know a lot of the Americans, they live on bacon, that's breakfast, and the Canadians have bacon a lot. But for instance, a half kilo, 500 pack, you're usually paying around 350 pesos, which equates to Australian dollars as about the $10 mark. So yeah, around $10 for half a kilo of reasonable quality bacon. Bacon is traditionally a Western style of breakfast. Fellows do eat a lot of pork, but from the areas I come from, they don't convert it into bacon or legs of ham as we actually do. They just eat it as pork. Then we go on to sausage. Now, I mentioned beforehand, because you can't get beef over here of any great quality, I found myself converting over to Virginia brand or similar things of types of Kransky or German sausage you can buy in packs of 10 or 8 or whatever, depending on the size of the sausage. And I was paying for this manufactured sausage around 380 pesos per pack of, I think it was 8. I could be wrong there, but that equates to around $10.85. Chicken, if you buy cooked chicken, and of course, as I said, this will vary from place to place all over the Philippines, but in the area that I was in Mindanao and there in central Visayas, if you went to a Chukis, which is the local fried chicken, not baked chicken, the rotisserie chicken, you're paying around 250 pesos, For a cooked chicken, it's around $7.20 Australian. Chicken meat in itself is probably comparable to Australia. It's a not overly expensive because it's in abundance, and if you get native chickens, it's even cheaper half the time. Eggs, I was paying 250 pesos, which again is around the $7.20 mark for 24 eggs, and they are beautiful eggs. They're usually very fresh, and they come in a punnet. So, I'm a big consumer of eggs. It was a good supplementary to my diet and whatever. Now we get down to the ones that I couldn't really understand, especially if you come from the West. Probably the easiest plant to grow are things like onions in the West. Well, over here, apart from the very small Spanish onions, and when they're as big as a quarter, to get a brown onion or a large white onion, which I'm used to, and most of the Americans for onion rings and this type of thing, you are paying at the moment, and it does vary, but not very, very much, but at the moment you're paying between 450 pesos and 620 pesos for a kilo of brown or white onions, depending on the size and the condition. So that, at the least, that's $12.80 a kilo for onions. So you can see that's hideously expensive compared to what I assume they pay in the United States and even in the UK. In Australia, we're buying a kilo bag of onions, and it's lucky to cost us 80 cents to $1. But here it's $12.80. It does vary seasonally, and if there's an abundance, you'll get it a lot cheaper. And again, for those living in different areas where these products are cheaper, I acknowledge that they're probably grown in the area and whatever, and you're lucky and we're not. Avocados, which are grown over here, but if you don't get the season when there's a glut on, you can be paying up to, as we are now at the moment, which is coming into the season in Dumaguete, 400 pesos a kilo for avocados, which is $11.40. Potatoes, again, per kilo, and the quality is not good. And because rather than rice, a staple for the Westerners is, especially the English, the Irish, and even for fries, although you can buy pre-packaged fries and they're expensive, but just to buy potatoes, you're looking at around 400 pesos per kilo, which equates to $11.40. Tomatoes, now there's a huge variance in tomatoes. If you can go to a farmer's market like they do have in Valencia here, well, in Dumaguete, you can usually get reasonable quality tomatoes, but don't be surprised again if most of the tomatoes are about the size of a quarter. They're green, they're not red as we're used to it, but from time to time you can find good quality tomatoes, and you're paying 350 plus pesos per kilo. That equates to a starting price of around $10. I obviously won't list everything, but that gives you an idea that if you step outside the boundaries of what you can purchase or consume within the phyllo diet, it's going to cost you a great deal of money. And, if you're there for a long period of time, you can do away with certain things, you can get used to certain things, but don't expect things that come either a great distance from an area where they're grown to wherever you're staying, or they're imported to be cheap. They're hideously expensive. And then you go into canned products, like canned tomatoes that we might pay 60 cents for in Australia. By the time they actually get here, you're paying the equivalent in Australia of $1.50 a can, which is double plus. So all these things which we consider to be basics are very expensive. We get onto electricity. Again, this varies a great deal from place to place. As an example of that, I'm running a 2-bedroom home in Dumaguete. It has one air conditioning unit, not a great deal of lights. I run gas, and our electricity bill month to month ranges in the 4,000 to 5,000 peso mark. Now at 5,000 pesos, that's $140 Australian. Now I say it varies because when we came up from Mindanao, which is actually in the provinces, and one would expect to be paying more in the provinces, a larger house burning more lights, more air conditioning units, we were only charged 3,000 pesos. So there is no, or doesn't appear to be, any regular, it depends who your supplier of electricity is, and it depends on the quality. And of course, everyone that lives in the Philippines knows that the brownouts occur regularly in the Philippines. Now, brownout, some places refer to it as a blackout. It can last for 5 minutes up to days. And this is a regular occurrence. Do not think if you've been out of power in the Philippines for 2 or 3 days that you can go back to the electrical company and get a credit of any description. It just doesn't work that way. They don't care about the inconvenience because everyone's inconvenienced. So you've just got to put up with blackouts and brownouts in the Philippines. Water costs approximately per month. That's the water coming to the house that you're using out of the taps, if you're charged at all. But in most areas, around about the 500 peso mark, which is around $14.20 Australian. But what you will consume a great deal of is filtered bottled water, and you usually buy it in 5-gallon containers, but very cheap, around 25 pesos per container. And you may have 5 of those on hand to do your domestics, to wash your fruit and vegetables. And I do suggest you wash all the fruits and vegetables over here, because they do use a huge amount of pesticides on them. So don't think you can go to a farmer's market, pick up an apple and take a chunk. It may make you sick depending on what they've sprayed on them. Then of course you've got the staples for the working man, beer, which is a large 1 litre bottle of any of the beers range in price from about 80 pesos in the province. But if you go and buy one, you've got to put down most of the time a deposit on the bottle, so you bring the bottle back. So usually it's a 20 peso deposit on the bottle. So let's bring it up to around the 100 peso mark. It will vary somewhat as you go through the Philippines, but that's around about $3 per bottle of the large 1 litre bottles. A lot of you guys will come over and because of the heat, you'll drink smaller bottles, and most outlets are around the 50 peso mark. So again, you're talking about $1.50, which is a lot cheaper than they're charging in Australia. The United States, you can pick up alcohol a lot cheaper than you can in Australia and Europe, but that'll give you some idea. Now, the old evil habit of cigarette smoking compared to Australia, where you're paying for a packet of 20 cigarettes because they're trying to price them out of the market. You could be paying between $28 and $35 for a packet of 20 cigarettes, whereas in the Philippines, the better quality, such as Marlboro and whatever, you can be paying up to 120, 130 pesos, which are, the $3 and $4 mark. So there's a great variance there. If you go local, you can pay as little as 40 and 50 pesos. That's to cover the smokers and the drinkers. Imported spirits, they do brew limited amounts like gin and vodka here, and it's cheap. Brandy, rums, they brew here, and it's very cheap. If you want your old wild turkey, or you want your from the United States, you want Dickles or anything like that, 1, you've got to find it, and 2, you're going to be paying through the nose for it. And be aware of this. A lot of the alcohol that you can buy in the Philippines is actually counterfeit. You'll taste it, so this doesn't taste right, everything looks right, but they do have a thriving counterfeit market in alcohol. So don't be surprised. So, you take that risk if you buy imported, if it's not from, say, somewhere like SM's or one of the larger supermarket chains. So that'll give you some idea of what the day-to-day pricings are. There's a million of them. You've always got to put your hand in your pocket and whatever. And this is why, to a certain degree, on a day-to-day basis, the Philippines is not a cheap place to be. But if you go native, and there's nothing wrong with going there, if you can adapt to 100% Filipino, you can live here very, very cheaply. If a family of 3 and 4 can live on $100, obviously they're peasants, a month and get through, you can structure your budget for the amount of money you're bringing over there and be strict with it, and you can survive. It just depends on the level of survival you want and the premises you want to live in, and how many facilities you want, and transport and whatever. So, me giving you a budget of how much it's going to cost you will vary very much on your tastes and what you're going to do. I hope that's of some benefit to a lot of you guys. Where you will find that the Philippines is expensive is anything out of the norm. Banking is relatively expensive if you want to do transfers and that type of thing. But the small holes in this country sink the big ships. Many a time I'll speak to expats, or I spoke to expats, and they said, I just can't understand where the money goes. It's very easy to say I'm going to spend 8,000 pesos a month on accommodation. This is how much my electricity is, and this is how much my insurance is. They're amounts that remain static, and yes, you can do a budget around them. But it's the small things, because you're always putting your hand in your pocket over here, whether it be for parking your motorcycle or whatever, and it doesn't seem much when you're throwing a coin of 20 or 10 or 5 peso. But when you add it up, if you don't keep good accounting, all of a sudden your pension for that month is gone and you're 3 and 4 and 5 days short. So keep an eye on it. If you need to, before you get used to it, go home each day, work out how much you've spent that day down to the peso. And after a month or 2 months, you can work out what you actually have to pay for and what you don't have to pay for, and you can structure your budget. Remember, your fixed fees, as far as I'm concerned, should be only 2/3 of your income, leaving you an amount to either. And that fixed fee should include some form of entertainment, because you can't sit in your room. But try to, on a fixed income, try to save at least 1/3. If you can't do that, you're underfunded, and I would suggest you're going to get into trouble if you can't save money over there with a fixed income. And I mean, it can at least 1/3, because everything that goes wrong will usually require you to do a number of things. Spend big if it's going to be health, to get the right type of health cover, even with insurance. Transportation is a huge expense if you've got to go somewhere. And if you've got to return to your own country, you're paying Western prices to do so. So keep that in mind. You must start saving for the emergency. Once you get a pool of money that you're happy with and you're not going to touch, well, then you can vary your budget from there. Okay, guys, that's it. As I said, subscribe. Love the comments, negative or positive. The other thing in regard to this particular vlog, it seems a little bit ludicrous to me, and obviously to you, for me to keep thinking of subjects when I'm not even living in the country. I do have a certain amount of knowledge which I believe would be beneficial, but it's very difficult for me at the moment to think of those. And I didn't want to start this channel and start repeating myself. Because I'm here, it's not as though I can wander around and show you the sites. I didn't want one of those vlogs anyway. So I'm going to do 1, 2, maybe 3 vlogs a week, as long as you as subscribers suggest what you want me to talk about. There's things that I think are important that I've already spoken about, but there's a number of things that I obviously know that it just hasn't come to mind in relation to what you guys out there might be interested in. So put them in the comments, and what I'll do from now on is I'll make up the vlogs basically answering your questions. So as that diminishes away, well, you can always refer back to old vlogs. And again, we'll get back to everyone living there. The prices I've quoted, everything I've quoted are pertaining to the areas I've been in. I don't want to have an argument about, no, this is wrong and that's right, and whatever. If it's more expensive or less expensive where you are, good on you. That's fabulous. I'm sure you're bright enough and you're living over there to work it out. This is specifically designed for people that come over, and it's probably erring on the side of caution, but I don't want people to be surprised, as with most of my vlogs and most of the subject matter. I don't want to scare people off the Philippines, but I don't want them coming over and think they're going to be living in a fool's paradise. Okay, cheers for now, guys. As I said, I'm working on another channel. I'll fill you in on at another time, probably through this, when I'm closer to launching that channel. I look forward to your comments. Go from there. Cheers from Phil. And Jen, even though she's 6,000 kilometers away, says hi and bye for now. And by the way, the shingles are very, very good now. Cheers.